Welcome back to Whispers of the Night, where fairy tales don't shine, they bruise. Tonight, we walk with the boy no one expected anything from. Not the clever son, not the strong one, just the one who was forgotten until he became useful. You've heard this story before, about a golden goose and laughter and luck, but that's not what happened. This isn't a tale about riches, it's about weight, about being followed for the wrong reasons, about what it costs to be kind in a world that only values what it can take from you. So settle in, let the silence stretch, because not every treasure is meant to be carried, and some gifts are just cages painted gold. And before we begin, tap like and subscribe, not because this is a happy story, but because it's one that dares to tell the truth. He was the third. Not the clever one. Not the strong one, just the third. At the dinner table, he sat near the edge, close to the firewood basket. He was called Simpleton, though he had never failed to understand what was going on, only failed to be what they wanted him to be. His mother loved her firstborn, Hans, for his work ethic, his second brother Karl for his ambition, and him for nothing in particular. Don't be a burden, she'd say, be useful or be quiet. He learned to be both. Their father had died young, or perhaps he had simply disappeared under the weight of unmet expectations and overdue debts. Either way, the absence left behind wasn't mourned, only absorbed. The family lived in a tired village where usefulness was currency and emotion was expensive. The eldest sons worked in the fields, the youngest swept what they left behind. When it came time to chop wood for the winter, it was, of course, Hans who went first. He'll bring back the best, their mother said proudly, and so Hans took the good axe and marched into the forest. He returned that evening empty-handed, grumbling about being disturbed by a strange old man begging for food. "You gave him nothing, I hope?" the mother asked. "Of course not," Hans scoffed. "He was probably a drunk, or worse, mad," she nodded approvingly. "Wise boy." The next day, Karl tried. He too met the old man, he too refused, and he too came back with nothing. Then it was the youngest son's turn, the one they had almost forgotten. They didn't give him the good axe. They gave him the dull one, the handle cracked. "Don't embarrass us," his mother said. "And don't be gone too long. I need you to clean the chickens." He walked alone, not confidently, just steadily. The forest was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. He didn't know what he was hoping to prove. He only knew he wanted to try. He reached the clearing and began to chop. The blade bounced, the wood resisted, his hands blistered fast. And then, just like before, the old man appeared, clothes torn, beard wild, eyes kind. "Could you spare a crust of bread?" the man asked. The boy hesitated. He only had one. It was stale, half crushed in his pocket. He gave it anyway. And the man smiled, not a greedy smile, but the kind that says, "You saw me." Few ever had. "Because you fed me," the old man said, "I will give you something others would never have earned." He pointed deeper into the woods. "There's a tree. Inside it you'll find a goose. But not just any goose. She lays golden feathers. Take her. She won't resist you, but guard her well." The boy wanted to ask questions, but the man was already gone. Like dreams or fathers or things you don't realise mattered until later. He found the tree, just like he'd been told. Inside, the goose shimmered, not like a myth, not like a miracle, but like something so out of place in the world that it made your chest hurt. She didn't squawk, she didn't flee. She looked at him and allowed herself to be carried. When he came home, they didn't notice the bird at first, only that he'd come back late and filthy. His mother scolded him, his brothers laughed. Then they saw the feathers and everything changed. Stuck, wanting what we can't name. The feathers shone like nothing they had ever seen. Gold. Not painted, not brass, not wishful thinking, but gold. Real, cold, heavy gold. At first they touched it with suspicion, then reverence, then greed. The youngest son, still barefoot, still sore, stood in the doorway of their small cottage holding the goose like a child might hold a doll. Carefully, protectively. Not because he knew what she was, but because she had not tried to escape him, and that meant something. "She's ours now," his mother said. And just like that, the boy was erased again. The brothers crowded around, eyes wide. "Where did you find her?" Hans asked. "Did she just follow you?" Karl added, disbelieving. The boy tried to explain, but he had never been good with words. And anyway, they weren't listening for his voice, just for something that sounded like permission. That night, they tried to pluck a feather. Just one, they said, just to sell, to feed the family, to fix the roof. Hans reached out and got stuck. Not like glue, not like honey, but like consequence. His hand would not let go. He yanked, he swore, he cried out. The feather stayed in place. Carl laughed, then tried to pull Hans away, and stuck too. By morning, the two oldest sons were standing on either side of the goose, cursing and flailing, unable to move more than a few inches without dragging each other. The youngest watched, unsure whether to panic or laugh. He did neither. He simply picked up the goose again, gently, and began walking. They followed, because they had no choice. The town was a half-day's walk, but it felt longer, not because of the distance, but because of the attention. 3 brothers walking in a line, one in front, carrying a golden goose, the other 2 clinging involuntarily behind, was not the kind of thing that went unnoticed. Children pointed, women whispered, men stepped back and narrowed their eyes. No one asked questions aloud, but everyone asked them silently. At an inn along the road, they stopped for water, or tried to. A barmaid with long fingers and longer curiosity saw the gleam of the feathers and reached out, murmuring, "What a beautiful bird." She never finished her sentence. She stuck to Carl, who was still stuck to Hans, who was still stuck to the goose. The innkeeper came running. "What are you doing to my daughter?" He grabbed her arm, yelled, swore, and stuck. Boy didn't say a word. He just kept walking, and the line grew. By the time they reached the village square, they were 9 people deep. A girl in ribbons, a butcher, a farmer with a limp, a priest. Each had tried to take something, a feather, a touch, a taste, and ended up bound. None could explain it. None would admit what they'd been reaching for. It was easier to blame the goose or the boy. The youngest didn't understand what was happening, but he recognized it. People wanted. They didn't know why. They didn't care how. They just wanted. And the moment they reached, they lost the ability to let go. At the edge of town stood a small, crumbling palace. Not a royal estate, more like a leftover dream from a time when kings ruled nearby and left relics behind. Inside lived a girl. Not a princess, not technically, but raised like one. The daughter of a count, or a duke, or someone with too many titles and not enough money left. She didn't speak, not because she couldn't, because she wouldn't. Some said trauma, others said rebellion. The truth didn't matter, only the silence. Her father tried everything, doctors, tutors, travelling magicians. No one could make her laugh, not even smile. And he grew desperate. So when he heard there was a golden goose and a line of townspeople stuck behind a barefoot boy, he sent for them. They arrived at the gate like a parade no one had rehearsed. The count watched from a balcony, half drunk on hope and half deaf to absurdity. "Send them in," he ordered. The girl waited in the garden. She sat among thorn bushes, hands folded, face unreadable. The boy approached slowly, the goose in his arms, the chain of stuck villagers trailing behind him like the tail of a comet. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The absurdity spoke for him, and for the first time in years, the girl laughed. Not politely, not delicately, but a real laugh, like stone breaking, like breath returning, like the sound of someone remembering who they were. It startled everyone, even the goose blinked. The spell, if it was a spell, broke. The townspeople fell free. Some stumbled, some cried, some ran. None of them apologized. Not to the boy, not to each other. They simply left. Only the girl remained, and the boy, and the goose. She looked at him and tilted her head. He looked back, unsure what she saw. She didn't speak, but she nodded as if to say, "You're not like the rest." He nodded too, because he wasn't sure he was either. Count came rushing, overjoyed. "You've done it!" She laughed. You've broken the curse." The boy blinked. "I didn't know there was a curse." "There always is," the count said, "when a woman won't behave." He offered gold, land, a place in the house. The boy declined, not because he didn't want it, but because he didn't trust it. He had seen what people did with gold. They reached, they grabbed, they stuck. He walked away. Goose in his arms. The girl followed. She said nothing, but she walked, and that was enough. Behind them, the town went back to normal. The inn reopened. The priest preached. The children forgot. Only a few would remember the goose. Fewer still would remember the boy. But the girl? She would remember him as the one who didn't try to keep her, didn't try to fix her, just walked beside her, silently towards somewhere else. The cost of being good when kindness becomes a currency. They kept walking, the boy, the girl, and the goose that glowed faintly even in daylight. They didn't have a destination, just a direction. Away. Away. Away from the town, the mother who never saw him, the brothers who only laughed when they thought they were bigger. Away from the look in people's eyes when they saw gold and forgot there was a person holding it. The girl still hadn't spoken, but she walked beside him like it meant something. And somehow it did. Their first night on the road, they slept beneath a tree. The boy gave the girl his coat. He didn't say anything about it, and neither did she. By morning, people had started to notice again, not the goose this time, but the girl. "Is that the silent daughter of the Count?" someone whispered. "The one who never laughed?" "They say she's cursed. They say he cured her." The story had already changed. By the time they reached the next village, he wasn't the boy with the golden goose anymore. He was the boy who fixed broken girls. People lined up to speak to him. Men brought their daughters, women brought their sisters. One woman came clutching her own face in shame. "They don't speak," they said. "They don't smile. They won't eat. Make them better." He tried to tell them he wasn't a healer, but they didn't want to listen. They didn't come for truth. They came for hope, or a shortcut, or a miracle in a shape that could walk and bleed and carry a bird. And because he was kind, he tried to help. He sat beside the girls, listened, nodded, let them touch the goose, let them talk or cry or stay silent. But when they didn't laugh, when nothing happened, he saw the same look in their parents' eyes that his mother used to give him. Disappointment, as if he had failed to perform. One man grew angry. "You fixed her," he snapped, pointing at the girl beside him. "Why not mine?" "She isn't mine," the boy replied quietly. "She chose to follow." The man didn't hear, or didn't want to. He spat on the ground and walked away. That night they found an abandoned barn and slept in the hay. The girl sat awake longer than usual. The boy watched her, unsure if she was going to speak. She didn't, but she reached out and gently touched his hand. It wasn't affection, it was recognition. They were both tired of being turned into something useful. The next morning a young woman found them at the edge of a river. She was older than him, but not by much. Sharp eyes, quiet mouth. "I've heard what you do," she said. He opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand. "I don't want a miracle," she said. "I just want to travel with you." He hesitated. She smiled. "Don't worry, I won't stick." The girl beside him didn't object, so he nodded, and the three of them walked on. At first it felt lighter. The new girl, Marta, was clever. She spoke in half riddles and hummed songs with no words. She never asked to touch the goose. She never asked the boy what he wanted. She just walked. But the more they moved, the more people gathered. The story followed them like a shadow with a mouth. A boy with a goose that makes people stick. A girl once silent, now healed. A growing group of wanderers following something that felt like salvation. The villagers began to offer food, clothing, money, not because they wanted to help, but because they wanted to be close. Maybe the goose would drop a feather. Maybe the boy would say something wise. Maybe they could laugh and be fixed. The boy began to feel it, the slow, creeping shift. He was no longer seen as a boy. He was a symbol, tool, a performer of goodness. And if he ever stopped smiling, stopped helping, stopped being soft, they would turn on him. The way people always turn on what they can't control. One evening, a wealthy merchant offered them a ride, a fine carriage. Velvet seats, warm blankets. "You deserve comfort," he said. But when the boy climbed in, he saw the catch. The merchant had 3 daughters, all seated inside. None of them spoke. All of them stared at the goose. He stepped back out. "I'd rather walk," he said. The merchant's smile thinned. "You're making a mistake. I usually do." And they left. Marta laughed, not loudly, not mockingly, just enough to say, that was the right thing. Later she asked him, "Do you regret being kind?" He paused. "No," he said. "Even now? I don't think kindness is what hurts." "What does then?" "Being expected to give it forever, without being allowed to need it too." She didn't respond, but she stopped walking ahead and started walking beside him. The girl from the palace never spoke, but her eyes said everything. She had once been voiceless by choice. Now she chose stillness, not silence, and that difference meant everything. They passed through village after village. The boy no longer told anyone what the goose did. He stopped accepting coins, stopped letting people touch her feathers, and still they came. Because when people believe you can fix them, they don't care whether you want to or not. They will break you if it means being whole. One night, he stared at his reflection in a still pond. He looked older, not in his face, but in his eyes. And for the first time, he whispered to himself, "I am tired. Not of walking, not of helping, but of being useful." Marta sat beside him, the palace girl curled nearby, asleep, and the goose, as always, rested in silence. Marta looked at the pond too. "Maybe one day," she said, "someone will ask you what you need." He didn't reply, because he couldn't imagine what that would even sound like. By now, they had become something between a procession and a rumour. The boy, the goose, palace girl who never spoke, and Marta, followed by others. A farmer who had seen them in the last village and decided to just walk along for a while. A baker who brought stale bread and stayed longer than he needed to. A mother with a quiet child who never let go of the goose's shadow. They followed at a distance, not close enough to call themselves companion, but not far enough to leave them alone, and no one asked them to go. That too, part of the problem. It had started subtly. A look here, a gesture there. A woman offering food but watching too closely as the goose ate. A boy asking questions not about the journey, but about the feathers, the gold, the secret. And the worst of them, those who said nothing at all, just walked, waited for something to happen, for something to drop, for something to change. Marta noticed it first. "They're not following you," she said one evening as they sat by a dying fire. "They're waiting for you to give them a reason to stay." "Isn't that the same thing?" "No," she said. "Following means belief. Waiting means calculation." The boy looked behind him. Half a dozen people, their faces blank, their footsteps slow. They spoke of nothing, smiled at nothing. They simply kept pace like ghosts who forgot they had died. He tried to confront one of them, a man with soft hands and expensive boots. "Why are you still here?" he asked. The man shrugged. "Maybe something will come of it." "Of what? You? Her?" He pointed to the goose. "That? And if nothing does?" The man didn't answer. He just smiled. The boy turned back to his companions. His real companions. The girl, still silent but awake now, more present. Marta, who never asked for more than he gave. Even the goose, who had never once demanded to be more than what she was. They were not holding on. They were walking beside. That difference was starting to matter more and more. The next town was larger, more noise, more eyes and more followers. They joined like rainwater trickling in from alleyways and inns and shadows. Some brought offerings, some brought questions, most brought nothing but need. A man stepped forward, thin, nervous, smiling too wide. "My wife hasn't spoken in years," he said. "Touch the goose." The boy stepped back. "It doesn't work like that." The man insisted, grew louder, angrier. Others began to crowd. Marta stood beside the boy, her hand near his. "Don't let them near," she whispered. But it was already happening. One woman lunged for a feather, another grabbed the boy's sleeve. A child clutched the girl's dress. They weren't followers anymore. They were clingers, not because they believed, but because they were afraid to let go. The goose let out a sound, low like wind caught in a bottle. Everyone froze. The boy stepped forward, voice shaking. "You can't stay with us," he said, "not just to the man, to all of them. This is not a cure. I'm not a miracle." No one moved. They didn't know how. That night, he cut the rope, not literally, but emotionally. He left the town quietly, took only what he needed, and when he turned around, only the girl and Marta remained. Marta didn't say, "I told you so." She just handed him the satchel. "I packed it before you decided to go." They walked in silence for a long time. It was raining lightly. The girl twirled once in the drizzle, just once, and then resumed her quiet pace. The boy looked at the goose. It looked back at him. No judgment, no pride, just presence. They stopped at a stream that night, cold and tired. The fire sputtered, and Marta asked, "Do you ever wonder what happens if we let her go?" The boy didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," he said, "but not because I want to be rid of her. Because you want to stop being followed?" He nodded. I don't want to be used. Marta looked into the flames. People don't always realize they're doing it, she said. Sometimes holding on is the only way they think they'll be safe. But I'm not their raft. No, she said. You're the reminder they need to swim. He lay awake that night, the girl curled beside him, the goose at his feet, and the truth pressed into him like the cold. Sometimes people cling to you, not because they love you or even need you, but because they've forgotten how to walk alone. And when you let them hang on too long, you start forgetting too. They reached the edge of a kingdom that didn't appear on most maps. It wasn't because it was forgotten. It was because the people in charge preferred it that way. Places like this thrive in secrecy. And people like him, the one who ruled it, understand the value of things that shine. The boy didn't intend to enter. He had stopped trusting palaces long ago, but it was raining and Marta was feverish and the girl hadn't eaten in 2 days. So when they saw the banner, a black sun on grey silk, fluttering above a cold stone gate, they knocked. And the gate opened. Not cautiously, but like it had been waiting. Inside they were greeted with warmth, fire, food, no questions, no demands, just a man with soft hands and sharp eyes. He introduced himself not as king, not as lord, but simply as the steward. The title was strange, but what was stranger was the way he looked at the goose, not with awe, not with greed, but with strategy. You've carried her a long way, he said to the boy gently. She chose to stay, the boy replied. Did she? The steward smiled. Or did you choose to hold on? The boy didn't answer. He didn't like the way the room seemed to breathe around the man, like even the fire obeyed him. For 3 days they stayed in the fortress. The steward provided everything. Warm meals, clean clothes, a doctor for Marta who began to recover, books for the girl who couldn't read but liked the pages anyway, and for the boy, silence, no demands, no praise, just time. Time to remember what it felt like to rest. And that, he would realise too late, was the beginning of the bargain. On the 4th morning, the steward invited him to his private hall. You've become a symbol, he said, whether you wanted to or not. I never asked to be. No one ever does. That's what makes symbols useful. The boy frowned. I don't want to be useful anymore. You misunderstand me, the steward said, pouring tea. You are beyond use. You are influence. He led the boy through a gallery, paintings, statues, relics, each one a face, a name, a person who had once been something to someone. And now, the boy asked. Now, the steward said, they are mine, not because I took them, because I offered what no one else did, rest. Rest, the boy repeated. Rest from decision, from direction, from being asked to carry others. The boy looked at the goose. She's never asked anything of me. No, the steward agreed, but they will. He gestured toward the world outside, the ones who follow, the ones who want, the ones who will never stop reaching. The boy stepped back. I won't give her to you. The steward didn't look surprised. That's not what I'm asking. What are you asking? To stay, he said. Here, safe, comfortable. Let the rest forget you. Let me take the weight of your symbol and use it properly. The boy's stomach turned. You want to use the goose? The steward raised an eyebrow. I want to use what she represents. Hope. Obedience, belief. You can't carry that forever, boy. I never wanted to, but now it wants you. He turned and walked away, back to the room, back to the girl, and to Marta, who sat sharpening a stick into a blade. Do you trust him? She asked flatly. No. Then we leave tonight. But the gates were locked, not with chains, with kindness, with just one more day, with it's raining too hard, with you must be tired. It was the steward's favourite kind of trap. Kind that looks like mercy. That night, the girl finally spoke. Just one word. Run. It shocked them all, not because it came from her mouth, but because of the certainty in her voice. So they did. They slipped out through a servant's tunnel. The steward didn't chase them. He didn't have to. He had planted enough doubt, enough weight, enough what-ifs. They walked in silence for a long time. Then the boy said, he made it sound easy. Marta didn't answer. The girl looked up at the stars, and the goose made a sound like grief. Later that night, at the edge of a forest, they stopped to rest. No fire, just breath, just presence. The boy held the goose in his lap. I think he's right, he whispered. I can't carry this forever. The goose looked at him, not with judgment, but with knowing. He had never asked to be followed, never asked to be needed. But the moment he chose to help someone, the moment he showed kindness, he had become something else in the eyes of the world. Not a boy, not a person, a tool, a myth, a means to someone else's end. "I don't want to be his symbol," he said. "Then don't," Marta replied. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," she said, "just not easy." They didn't sleep that night. Some burdens are lighter when shared, but others, especially the ones tied to identity, stay heavy, even in company. And yet, he chose not to leave the goose behind. Not because he needed her, but because she had never needed him. She had simply stayed, and in a world of taking, that meant more than gold. They reached the edge of the forest, where the road broke in two. To the left, a city, full of light and noise and people who loved stories more than truth. To the right, hills, quiet, untamed, path without promise. The boy looked down each way. The girl said nothing. Marta waited. The goose simply sat by his side, feathers dulled now, not because the gold had faded, but because they no longer needed to shine. He remembered the first time he had held her. Back then, she had been magic. Proof that he mattered. Now she was something else. Not a miracle, not a burden, just real. And he wasn't sure he could carry both her and what she had come to symbolize, because wherever he went, someone would want to follow, to claim, to ask, to take. He sat down on a mossy rock and watched the goose waddle a little ahead, pecking at nothing in particular. "She's never belonged to me," he said. "No," Marta agreed, "but she stayed. That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because I don't know what to do with something that doesn't want anything from me." The girl crouched beside him, her hand brushing the goose's feathers gently. "She stays because she chooses to," she said. Her voice still held the stillness of silence. Not weak, rooted, like someone who had learned that speaking was a responsibility, not a requirement. He looked at the goose, and she looked back. No magic flared, no golden light, just a quiet understanding. And then he stood, walked forward, not far, just enough, and opened his hands. No grand speech, no farewell, he just let go. The goose blinked, then waddled away, not in anger, not in sorrow, but as if this had always been part of the story. They watched her disappear into the woods. No one clapped, no one cried, no one turned to stone or exploded into gold dust. She was just gone. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the boy felt light. Not because he had lost something, but because he had stopped being defined by it. They walked on, he and Marta and the girl. No followers, no believers, no audience. Just three people walking through the quiet, unknown space where stories go when they're finished. And somewhere, far behind them, people would still talk. They'd say, "He gave away a golden goose. He could have been rich. He was foolish. He wasted it." And maybe they were right. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't trying to be remembered. Maybe he was just trying to be free. Because the hardest part of any journey isn't the weight you carry. It's the moment you choose to set it down and keep walking.